Right, hello, greetings. It's Thomas Staffen here for my weekly Fasting Sunday talk, and yeah, I'm pleased to be here, and it's Lughnasadh, which is incredibly important. The 1st of August is a Druid, marking in time. What we like to do as Druids is, as do all religions, have significant days. Lughnasadh marks there are different theories, the beginning of autumn, the time of harvest. We now go into the months of August, September, October, which are kind of autumn time, and then we come to Samhain, which is the beginning of winter. So I thought I'd share some poetry from the Druid perspective. I shared last week, some literary works, and I'm in the room of Thalia still, which here at the Muses Museum is the room dedicated to literature. And I'm helping with the Delphic Games. We believe that literature, the arts, music, dance, drama, all the work of the Muses can help heal humanity from our ills, our conflicts, our violence, and so on. There's and once we've done that, then we can really sort out the environmental problems we're facing, the climate change, which there are forest fires sweeping across Turkey now. Dreadful. Antalya, beautiful city I've been to, not far from there. When will it ever end? The trouble is the military on the planet uses up vast amounts of trillions of dollars for weapons and militarism, the creation of which all pumps out CO2 and creates more problems. It uses up scarce resources. And all the money that's locked up in militarism is not therefore available for social development and for environmental work. And this is why, vast poverty on the planet. I mean, it's scandalous. And my view is that as a peace activist, the environmental issue and the peace issue are two sides of the same coin. We can't solve the world's environmental problems without solving human conflict and militarism, because all the resources we need to tackle the one are being locked up in the other at the moment. And so CND are organising a big protest outside Faslane on September the 26th, coming up. My friends in Scotland, I hope you'll all be there. I would be there if I was still living in Scotland. Linking, the environmental issue and nuclear weapons and the military issue. September 26th is the International Day for a nuclear-free world, and so we'll be celebrating it here in the Museum of the Muses, and they will all over the world. But the link is so important. So through poetry and the arts and music, the Delphic Games also has a sequence for ecological art. We need to get performers who are now inventing new ways of doing the arts, digital arts, the greening of the arts. If Leonardo da Vinci was alive today, he would be on our board, I assure you, because we need to transfer the resources of militarism towards the peace arts, really. And that's why I'm going to be sharing today with you some celebration of the peace arts from the ancient traditions of the Druids, and with a few surprises thrown in. So, without further ado, I want to start with my first reading. This is actually from a philosophical book by, it's a very rare book, this by K.E. Barlow, published by Faber and Faber in 1942, so this is during the World War II. It's called The Discipline of Peace. And this is one of my most precious books, because I run the Global Green University. I've been a green philosopher for many years. I founded Philosophers of Peace with John Francis Phipps, who also an eco-philosopher like me. And this book is really important. It was a pioneering study in its day, and it says the following quote. It's all about the soil. What Barlow says is that we have to get our relationship with the soil, with nature right, as human beings, if we're going to get peace on the planet. And he's musing about what had caused World War II. Why had we gone so astray that we're dropping bombs on each other, up to and including the nuclear bomb? And things like the Holocaust. He didn't know about the Holocaust. It was not really known in 1942 in Britain. But he knew the bigger picture. And this is what he says. The degree of interference which man can practice is a measure of his biological control. To exercise that control adequately, however, man must regard not his own whims, but the character of that whole biological performance which has been entrusted to him. At present, instead of looking upon the world as something to manage, man regards it as a field of exploitation, and consequently acts as if it did not matter what he made of it. What ecology reveals is that the whole world of life has an architecture and balance of its own. An architecture, I would add, which embraces man within the field of its discipline. Insofar as man defaces that architecture or shifts that balance destructively, he is likely to bring about results detrimental to his own performance, which, if the damage proceeds far enough, may end with the destruction of his control. You know, food for thought, and Barlow hits the nail on the head that there is in nature and human interaction, society, there's a sort of, a primal contract. We're part of a bigger architecture, which the Quran calls the divine intelligence, and I agree with that terminology. It's what the Galileo Commission is pointing towards in its work, and this is like modern scientists agreeing that there is evidence of a spiritual intelligence behind the framing and structure of the universe, including nature, the soil, and by disturbing that, we've created conditions which are leading to global warming and imminent species self-destruction, which is why the issue of peace and the issue of balance with nature are so embedded. Now the Druids spoke from this tradition. The Druids knew this, and in the articulation of the Druid cosmology, all Druids were sworn to protect, preserve, and defend Mother Earth, and the balance between, the supernatural cosmos, the cosmos of the gods, the ecology of divine transcendence, the ecology of nature, the mountains, the hills, the rivers, the four elements, and our physicality, our physical bodies, and the animal kingdom, and so on. And then the human world, societies, tribal councils, the wisdom of the elders, and how children can be brought up, initiated into an appreciation of love for that balance between all the kingdoms of being, the kingdoms of the supernatural world, the natural world, and the human social world. And they're all important, they're all divine, and they all nest into each other, as Ken Wilber would say. There isn't a sort of, this one's better, that one's better. They're all mirror images of each other, in fact. And that's why science is so interesting. So I'm going to come now to the first of what I call the I Am poems. Now, I spoke about this at the Mary Magdalene conference we just finished on the 22nd of July. I'm going to read a sequence of these I Am poems because the bard, or the druid, when they're in their inspired modality, feels at one with the whole of nature, the whole of history, the whole of the cosmos, and speaks from that place of the I Am, which is when you've transcended your little ego, I am this person born in that town, this nationality, that job, that status. No. When you transcend that, when you go on the druid quest and your ego is reborn, and it's the same in Christianity, it was the same concept. When Jesus had the strength of character to leave his little village and, go on his journeys and took initiations, including from John the Baptist, and then he went into the desert. Jesus was in our perspective, he was a very profound transcendental operator of Druidry, seership, Dharma seeing, whatever language you want to use, prophetic insight. The prophets and druids are essentially interconnected. You know, the Quran says that every tribe has its prophets. Well, thank you. The druids are the prophets of the Celts, and one of them is this amazing guy called Amergin, who, by tradition, some of his poetry's come down. His historicity, I think, is pretty much definite. He led the Gaels into Ireland, the Gaelic people. They came at the end of a long sequence of other settlers, and a whole fleet of ships came from Spain with Amergin in the prow. They got close to the shore, and lo and behold, there was a magical mist appeared, and they couldn't see the shore anymore, and the ships were floundering about where to go. And Amergin told one of the chaps on his ship to go up the highest mast, because he knew this was a magical mist. And sure enough, the boy could then point in the right direction. You know, where's the shore? So the ships landed, and as they landed, Amergin jumped out, and as he stepped on the shores of Ireland, he said this poem, which is a very moving ancient poem. I'm going to read part of it. I am the wind which blows over the sea. I am the wave of the ocean. I am the murmur of the billows. I am the ox of the 7 combats. I am the vulture upon the rock. I am a tear of the sun. I am the fairest of plants. I am a wild boar in valour. I am a salmon in the water. I am a lake in the plain. I am a word of science. I am the spear point that gives battle. I am the God who creates in the head of man the fire of thought. Who is it that enlightens the assembly upon the mountain? Who telleth the ages of the moon? Who showeth the place where the sun goes to rest? So Amergin, in his pronouncement, is asserting himself as the Druid of the Gaels and saying, look, we come in peace, we come on our spiritual quest for truth, we come to settle this land because it was shown by many signs, in Arabic ayat, that should be done, and we mean no harm to anyone. In actual fact, the story is, very interesting because there are some gods waiting, hidden in the sand dunes off the shore, and eventually they make themselves known, the Tuatha Danann, the divine race of gods that were already there in Ireland. And they come forward, and there's a negotiation between the Tuatha Danann and Amergin and other druids he had with him, and they agree eventually to, the gods say, look, we know you're great people and we love the Gaels, and yeah, Amergin, you're a great druid, but I'm afraid we're going to have to fight you because we don't want you settling here. That's the way of the world. And so they make a peace agreement. Amergin and the ships are going to withdraw 9 waves distance, which is a beautiful poetic way of talking about it, like 9 crests visible, so you go out there and have a think. I'll leave you to research what happens next. But the story of Amergin and the settling of Ireland is, it's deep in Irish soul and literature. Right, I want to read another poem now from a different perspective, in parallel, because, when was that Gaelic settlement of Ireland? Well, there's no definite way of dating it, but certainly, 2,000 or 3,000 BC is in all probability. Around that time, in the northern Indian region, the rishis of the early Sanskrit tribes were developing the capacity to see into the fundamentals of reality, just as the Druids were doing over in the Celtic world. And eventually, out of that came the Vedas. The Rig Veda about creation, and the other Vedas, the Atharva Veda about mantric sounds, spells as they're called. And then finally the Upanishads, which were written down, not till about 800 BC, but still, pretty ancient. And I'm doing a commentary on the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, which you can listen to on the Green University website, and it's one of the oldest, one of the most complex, and it provides the metaphysics underlying the I Am poems of the Druids and others. I can't read the whole thing, sadly, but I'm going to read little parts of it. Verily, in the beginning, this world was Brahma. It knew only itself. I am Brahma. Therefore, it became the all. Whoever of the gods became awakened to this, he indeed became it. Likewise, in the case of seers. Likewise, in the case of men. Seeing this, indeed, the seer Vamadeva began, I was Manu, and the sun. This is so now also. Whoever thus knows, I am Brahma, becomes this all. Even the gods have not power to prevent his becoming thus, for he becomes their self. Verily, even if one performs a great and holy work, but without knowing this, that work of his merely perishes in the end. One should worship the self alone as his true world. The work of him who worships the higher self alone as his world does not perish. For out of that very self-consciousness, that Brahman, he creates whatsoever he desires. Now, this self, verily, is the world of all created things. And so on. It's a complex and dense text, and you can listen to my complete commentary. But you can see there the metaphysics behind the I am statement of the Druids. I want to go on and give another example now of another I am poem, and this time from a great Welsh poet called Taliesin, who, again, very similar to Amergin's poetry, is from this same I am cosmology. Now, what's amazing about Taliesin is that he is the oldest poet to have been preserved in ancient Brittonic, which is the ancestor of Welsh. And when I lived in Wales for 10 years and was studying intensely Druidry, I studied the legends of Taliesin in great detail. I actually lived close to Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion, which is the place where he came from. And that was my little shopping town, you know, with the post office and all that. I would go there from Llanfairpwll. Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion and I go back a long way. There's actually a ring of stones there by the river, which I used to go and sit at. Because they once had the Welsh Eisteddfod in Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion, which is a beautiful, beautiful town. A friend of mine runs a cafe there called Just 3 Drops, which is based on the Taliesin legend. Because the legend is, for those that don't know it, Taliesin was a normal little boy growing up in Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion, long time ago, and he used to go walking in the woods. I mean, he was a lovely, carefree chap, and he must have been about 9 maybe. And he went walking in the woods one day, on a summer day, like today, maybe it was Lughnasadh, and he saw this old woman in the woods who beckoned him over, and she looked interesting, you know, sort of slightly eccentric. And she said, "Do you want to earn some money? Do you want to earn some money, little boy?" He's called Gwion Bach, little Gwion. He said, "I don't mind if I do, you know. Well, I tell you what, you can look after my pot in my cottage, and you stir it, and don't let the fire go out. And if you do that for a year and a day, you'll get a gold sovereign." You know, well, I mean, a gold sovereign is jolly good, plus this is a nice job, really. All he has to do is look after a fire and a pot. So he thought, fine, and because he was a, you know, self-contained kind of lad, he went off back with her to her cottage, which could have been somewhere near my cottage. I had a cottage just near there, 4 miles outside Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion, in this beautiful river valley called the Banwy, which is to die for. I used to go swimming in it in the summer when it was hot. A little pool in the stream. Well, it's a river, which was where I used to do my daily Druid prayers. And he went to the cottage and he stirred the pot and he looked after the fire. And basically she was making a magic potion. It was going to take a whole year and a day to make. And it was full of all kinds of magic herbs, and she was a mistress of the woods. She knew what to put in there. All kinds of magic stuff. And it was to give her son, who was a bit plain, a bit boring, a bit ordinary, not very handsome, not very clever, a bit of a dull chap, to give him like a magical wisdom, to give him real charisma and insight and knowledge. It was a knowledge potion. And she was doing this as a good mum. You know, she wanted her son, a Gathfi he was called, to be, you know, I mean, he's to have his full inheritance. So, Gwion Bach stirs the pot for a year and a day. I mean, they take shifts. I think him and Gathfi, they take turns. And then, on the very last day, he's alone in the cottage, stirring the pot with the fire, keeping it going. She's gone out. The other boy's gone out. And just at that moment, 3 drops fall out onto his fingers. They bubble over. I mean, he let the pot get too hot. And he licks them. And instantly, he gets the magic that the other boy's supposed to get. He becomes omniscient. He has the powers of seership. He becomes a druid. He becomes a rishi. He can see the Brahman. He has these psychic faculties. And, you know, you can discuss. I mean, certainly the druids used things like magic mushrooms. They used, you know, hemp. They used all kinds of magic things to put in their potions. We know from Getafix that, you know, the Celts in Europe were doing the same. Even though that's a comic and it's just comedy, I mean, there's huge evidence that, yes, of course, they were masters of what science called psychedelics, because these were magic tools that enabled people to travel between the worlds, just as the ancient Greeks did in their Mysteries at Eleusis, according to Gordon Wasson, and other explorers who've researched this. So yes, it was some kind of a magic potion that gave him this seership, and in that moment he felt terribly guilty because, gosh, he knew that the lady of the cottage was coming back across the fields at that very moment to come and get it, and would find out what he'd done and would be really angry, probably turn him into a toad or something. So because of his newfound powers of insight and wisdom, he scarpered out the back door, and he knew that she would come after him, so he turned himself into a hare, which can run very fast. Well, the lady comes home, sees what's happened, knows instantly that Taliesin, or Guyenbach, has got the drops by mistake, and the potion is only good once, so that means he's got the fruit of the year. And so she chases after him, and she turns into a greyhound because she can run faster than the hare. And it turns out she's a goddess. She's actually Ceridwen in disguise. She's not a little old lady. She's Ceridwen, the goddess of the Celts of Wales. She is the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of the changing moon, the goddess of the divine feminine wisdom, like Athena or Minerva. So Taliesin sees, oh my God, she's coming after me as a greyhound. So he leaps into the river and becomes a salmon swimming away, as fast as he can. And I can just see where it happened. It was at my river in Banwy, Well, Ceridwen, following after, sees what's happened, and she is, determined to get this chap. He's stolen all the goodies that were for her son. So she turns into an otter, which can swim even faster than the salmon. And the otter comes and is gaining on Guyenbach in the form of the salmon. And just as she's about to plunge on him, Gwion in desperation turns into a little wren and flies up into the air. And, can go really high and thinks he'll escape that way. But no, Ceridwen is very, very crafty, and she becomes, an eagle, like the king of the birds. I mean, a mother eagle. Poor little wren doesn't stand a chance. And so Wren doesn't know what to do, so they're chasing each other through the sky. Wren's only got a couple of seconds left. He turns himself into a little tiny seed and drops down into a farmer's barn and becomes lost in amongst the little seeds of corn now. He thinks, I'll hide here and she'll never get me. And it's quite clever, quite fast thinking actually by Guyenbach. But, he's up against a goddess. I think he realises that. He's beginning to realise that. This is a real serious heavyweight goddess. This is Ceridwen. And she turns into a hen, and she pecks and pecks through the corn and finds him. She knows, this is Guyenbach hiding out, pretending to be a little corn seed. She gobbles him up. And she becomes pregnant. She turns back into Ceridwen, and she's now pregnant with this little seed. So Guyenbach is now inside her womb. This is a really interesting story, and as Druids we learn this story over many months, many years of teaching. I'm really summarising it. And, if you're interested, you should get involved and join a Druid order and study it in great detail. It's about psychological transformations and about how we change from different shapes and we shapeshift during a lifetime. I've had many incarnations, even in this one life. I'm sure you have. And then, we think we have to run away from wisdom. We run away from the goddess. But actually, all along, she's coming after us out of love, in fact. And when you finally are gobbled up by the goddess, she conceives. So what was that terrifying fear becomes the divine fire of love, which is when the ego dissolves and you surrender to the goddess in love. And then a new generation is born. And so the poem is also about incarnation and reincarnation. It's a story of many, many lifetimes. Anyway, to cut a long story short, eventually, after 9 months, Ceridwen gives birth to a little baby boy. He's very sweet, lovely little chubby chap. But she's very cross with him because this is that horrible Guion that stole the potion for her son. So she sticks him in a coracle, and she puts him out to sea. You know, the mermaids can look after you. I'm done with you. Goodbye. And she doesn't care if he lives or dies or gets flooded and drowns, you know. So what happens is Guion, in his little boat, goes along the coast of Wales, and eventually it comes into the, I think it's the river just north of Aberystwyth, the River Dovey, the estuary there. It's still there today. You can get the train. If you go to Aberystwyth from Welshpool in Powys, you pass the estuary, which I've done many times. And because the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth has all the great sources on Taliesin and these poems, and the proceedings of the Eisteddfod, which are still going, where the Druids come together, and in Aberystwyth there's a Centre for Advanced Celtic Studies where they study this stuff, and then they compare it to other Celtic traditions, and like Amergin and so on, and the Irish. Anyway, what happens is the coracle gets tangled up in some fisherman's lines. There's a fisherman out there, just minding his own business. He's got some nets out, and he notices this coracle with a little baby boy in it. And he goes out, he wades out, and he rescues it. And he brings the little boy ashore, dries him off, because he's got a bit splashed, otherwise unhurt. And a miracle happens. The little boy becomes like a little, instead of being a little baby, he becomes a little boy, like an 8-year-old or something. And he stands there, and when he asks, "Who are you?" The boy speaks in tremendous confidence and recites a poem. And that's what I'm going to read to you. I have been in a multitude of shapes before I assumed a consistent form. I have been a sword, narrow, variegated. I will believe when it is apparent. I have been a tear in the air. I have been the dullest of stars. I have been a word among letters. I have been a book in the origin. I have been the light of lanterns, a year and a half. I have been a continuing bridge over 70 abbas. I have been a corse. I have been an eagle. I have been a coracle in the seas. I have been compliant in the banquet. I have been a drop in a shower. I have been a sword in the grasp of the hand. I have been a shield in battle. I have been a string and harp, disguised for 9 years, in water, in foam. I have been sponge in the fire. I have been wood in the covert. I am not he who will not sing of a combat, though small, the conflict in the battle of Godden of Sprigs.